Hi everyone, hope everybody's safe and well. First activity today is a phonics game, and I've just drawn this grid out on the back of a cereal box, and you can see in each of the little boxes I've written a different sound. So we've got ch, e, sh, a, oo or th, I, ch, o, sh, oo, e, ng, a, sh, I, O, R and oo or. So you could use any sounds. You'd probably want to use sounds that your child is pretty confident with, because for this game they're going to have to be thinking about words that contain these sounds. So yeah, I'd probably pick sounds that you know they're relatively confident with. So you could adjust this to suit your child's needs. So you could use the same sounds or you could use some different sounds. I'm only using set 1 and set 2 sounds here, but if you've got a year 1 child, you might like to use set 3 sounds as well. Then I'm going to use these little people, the little trolls people, as our counters, and then we've got a dice. You could use anything as your counters, so you could go outside and find little pebbles. You could use dried pasta, anything really could be your counters. And then we've got a dice as well that we found from another game we've got. But if you've not got a dice, or die I should say, then you could always just create a little spinner. So you could, on a piece of paper, draw a circle, split it into 6 and write down your numbers from 1 to 6, and then just use something like a crayon or a pencil, and then you spin it and see what number it lands on, just as an alternative rather than using dice. So how you play the game, you don't have to play it this way, you could create your own game, your own version of it, but this is how we're going to play as. So we're going to start the counters, obviously, in the start position, roll the dice, or die, and then whichever sound we land on, so say we rolled a 2 and then landed on E, you've then got to think of a word that contains the E sound. So for example, I might say sleep, and then I'm going to have a go at writing the word down. So you can see I've written down the word sleep. And then if you get it correct, then you can move forward 1 space, but you don't need to then think of another word. You wait till your next turn to then roll again and go to the next sound and think of another word. And then what I've done, just to make it a bit more fun, is on some of the spaces I've drawn smiley faces, and some of them I've drawn stars. And you can kind of make up what you then want your child to do on those spaces. I thought maybe for the stars, we might play a song. They can pick a song that they'd like to play, and we might play it on our phone or something. And then I thought on the smiley faces, we might do something like you've got to do a silly dance or something like that. So you can just kind of make up what they do on those other spaces. But I just thought it might be nice to do a few different spaces where they're doing something a bit more fun. And yeah, the aim of the game is obviously to get to the finish as quickly as possible, and they can obviously do it quicker if they're getting the word correct and then they're moving forward 1. And I thought this might be quite nice to play as like a family together, get everybody involved. So yeah, that's the first activity. Then the next little activity is a number activity, and what I've drawn here is what we call a part whole model. So the 2 smaller circles are our parts and the bigger circle is our whole, and as you can see we're going to be using 8 as our whole. Now you don't have to use 8, you could pick any number you wanted. So if you've got a year 1 child, you might like to pick a slightly bigger number. This is for a reception child, so we've picked the number 8. And we're going to be using as our counters, we've got a little tub here of mini marshmallows. So again, you don't have to use marshmallows, you could use dried pasta, cereal, You don't have to use edible things. You could use like little glass pebbles, little figures, anything could be your counters. We're just going to be using marshmallows today because I thought it might be a little incentive to do the equations. I'm going to say if we do all the equations, then we can eat the marshmallows afterwards. So hopefully it'll be a nice little incentive. So the first thing to do for this activity is to count out the whole and get our 8 marshmallows. So we've counted out here the 8 marshmallows as our whole, and now we're going to see how many different ways we can make 8 and write down some addition equations. So we're going to start by moving all 8 across to here so that we can say in our parts we've got 8 and 0. So our first equation is going to be 8 and 0 is equal to 8. And that's our first equation, and we're just going to write that down. And just to check the equation, we would move the marshmallows back to the whole. So we'd get our parts together. So obviously there's nothing to move across here, and then we've got our 8 to move across here. And then you just get your child to just double check and count them to check that there is 8 in the whole. And then we'd write the equation down. So we've got 8 and 0 is equal to 8. Now this time, I'm going to get them to move 1 here and then the rest here, and then get them to count how many is in each of your parts. And so this time you can see that there's 1 in the top part and 7 in the bottom part. And then you'd get them to say 1 add 7 is equal to, and then just get them to move them across just to double check that there are still 8 when you add them together. And then you'd write that equation. So you'd write it down, 7 add 1 is equal to 8. And then you just keep going like that until your child has found all the different ways of making 8.